What's up, friends? Welcome to our channel. My name is Crystal. I'm in my kitchen today. Again, it is about 45 degrees, cloudy on a Monday, so it's super chaotic here. We've got homeschool and activities later with the kids that we got to go to, so I am here in the kitchen early in the morning ready to go to get some ready-to-eat meals canned up. The one I'm working on today is the beef stew with vegetables, and it's super basic, super easy. I love homemade ready-to-eat meals. I used to love doing the freezer bag meals way back when, and I haven't done it lately because actually we have no more room in our freezer. Our deep freezer is full. Our freezer upstairs is full because we have a very small kitchen and we can't fit a very big refrigerator. So our side-by-side refrigerator has a very small freezer, and that one's full too. So I'm going to be canning up a meal that will be easy to dump and go, and I'm really excited for it. Last time I pre-made meals, frozen meals, it was right before I had my daughter Lila a year ago, and I had pre-made some lasagnas and baked mac and cheese and a bunch of different stuff, as well as cookie dough for the holidays. It's really convenient and super easy, and they're homemade, so it's all from your kitchen still, and it's just convenience meals. And so that's what we're going to be making today. I already prepped a lot of the vegetables yesterday throughout the day. I cut up carrots and potatoes are sitting in water. All that stuff is ready. The only thing I haven't done yet is cut up any celery. But let me talk about the recipe that I'm going to be using. I have this book here. This is the Ball Blue Book Guide to Preserving. I will have it linked in our Amazon storefront down in the description if you are interested. It is the beef stew with vegetables recipe right here on page 104. I have the 4 to 5 pounds of beef that I need to get cooked up a little bit. It calls for vegetable oil, but I'm going to be using avocado oil. I have the potatoes all cubed, sliced carrots. I do not have the celery done yet. I have to check to see if I have any in here. If not, I have celery growing out in our garden, so I'm going to pick some of that. I have the onions chopped already, and then we're adding salt, thyme, and pepper. And that's it. It's super basic, but it will be delicious. The jars that I'm using are the wide mouth quart size jars, and I really like them wide mouth for chunky things like this because it's just easier to pour out of the jar. You don't have to worry about too much of a shoulder. I like the regular mouth quart size jars for things like sauces, so tomato sauce, applesauce, things like that are good in the regular mouth quart size jars, but for stuff like this I prefer the wide mouth. And I washed these yesterday, so they should be ready to go. Like I said, we have a busy schedule here at the house today, but I'm gonna just kind of check in with you throughout it to show you what step I'm on in the canning process. I like to use books like this to keep me on track because we always have so much going on during the day, and having a book like this that I can alter the ingredients to what we like to eat and know that the steps are pretty straightforward, it helps to keep me on track. I often get distracted with homeschool projects, all the other things that we do here, and having something like this open for me to just be like, okay, yeah, I already did that. Let's go to the next step. These recipe books just keep me on track. I'm going to be using my pressure canner here, the Presto pressure canner. It's up here getting its exercise right now this time of year. So if you could remember to do all the YouTube-y things, like, share, subscribe, we would really appreciate it. And we're just really happy you're here, and let's start making some beef stew at 9:30 in the morning. Now I'm going to be cooking up the beef. I'm going to be just using this one large stock pot and browning the meat and everything at the bottom, and then layering the ingredients and getting that cooked up before we can it. The first thing I'm going to be adding is a tablespoon or so of oil. It says vegetable oil, but I'm going to use avocado oil.
Find the words that have the same.
I think one of them sounds good.
So this has been cooking down. I don't want to overcook it, so I'm going to add in the rest of the vegetables. You're adding in 3 quarts of cubed potatoes, 2 quarts of sliced carrots, 3 cups of chopped celery, 3-ish cups of chopped onions. I'm just going to give that a stir. Just adding enough water to cover the top of it. I don't want to add too much water. I just want enough in here just to cover the top of everything. Now I'm going to add the seasoning. 1.5 teaspoons of thyme. It said 1 teaspoon of thyme. I added 1.5 teaspoons of thyme. I just felt like 1 teaspoon wasn't enough. 1.5 teaspoons of salt. I'm gonna add 2 teaspoons of salt because I just, again, don't feel like that's enough. And it says 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper, but I'm gonna add 3/4 teaspoon of black pepper. Now we're gonna bring this up to a boil, and that's probably gonna take a little bit because it's such a big pot, but we're gonna let that come up to a boil. I had to get my daughter down for a nap, so that's been boiling long enough. I'm going to remove it from the heat. Swap it with our pressure canner here. It's a Presto pressure canner. The first thing I'm going to do is make sure the rack is on the bottom, and then using one of the quart-sized jars, I'm going to add in 3 quarts of water. Right, now I'm going to bring this up to a simmer here. And while that's warming up, I'm going to place some of the jars in the bottom of the pot. This is going to preheat the jars before I put very hot liquid into them. Extreme temperature changes to the glass can cause them to crack or break. A little bit too much buoyancy with that many in there, but it'll be fine. So we're gonna let those heat up a little bit. I'm just gonna place the lid on top. I'm not gonna lock it down or anything. I'm just gonna place it on top so it gets nice and hot inside the canner. The other thing I forgot to add in is that I usually add in 2 tablespoons of vinegar to the 3 quarts of water, and that's just to prevent any kind of staining on the jars from the tap water. So now I'm going to pack the jars. So what we're going to do is we're going to fill each jar leaving 1 inch of headspace. The headspace is the distance between the contents of the jar, so whatever is in the jar and the rim. That distance is really important. If you overfill a jar, it can cause the lids not to seal. Removing air bubbles is also important. We do that after because we want to make sure that there's no air bubbles that can also affect the headspace. So I'm just going to use my canning funnel. My canning funnel, this one shows the headspace on here, but I found it to be like not always accurate depending on the kinds of jars that I'm using. For wide mouth jars, it seems to be pretty good. The regular mouth jars, I don't know why, but I find that the headspace is sometimes off. I'm going to try and keep it so that it's an even amount of ingredients. Okay, so I'm just gonna double check here. Okay, that's pretty good. And then we want to clean the rim of the jar, making sure that there's no residue from the beef stew that might be on the rim, or dust or anything like that. And using a lint-free cloth that doesn't leave any kind of fibers behind makes it easier to do that. I'm going to take a clean lid and center it on the jar, band, and just using our tips of our fingers, we tighten it down finger tight. So that just means using the tips of your fingers, tightening down until resistance is met, and then tightening just a little bit further, and then that's good enough. And then we have one jar done. So I'm going to go through and fill the rest of these jars. I have 7 quart-sized jars in our canner, and it's still on a low simmer. I have my lid here. I'm just gonna double check and make sure that everything is okay. This is the vent pipe. This is where the steam comes out and where we put the pressure regulator will sit on top of here. And then this is our gauge, okay? And underneath this, there's a couple of things we wanna check. One, we wanna check and make sure that the seal is in there good and tight, and that it's not misplaced in any way. And then with the vent pipe, we're just gonna hold it up to the light and make sure we see light through there. I don't know if I can do that on the camera, but as long as there's nothing clogging the vent pipe, we should be good. This is the lock button, so we're gonna make sure that that is free to move up and down. Just wanna make sure that there's nothing blocking anything from working the way that it should. Like I said before, it's a Presto pressure canner. In order to close it, we line up the open-close V here with this one, and then we can just twist it close. And then I always do this just to make sure, but I undo it and then redo it just to double check that it's good. Then you want to sit it nicely on your burner, so make sure that it's on your burner evenly. Clear away anything. And then we're going to turn the burner up. I'm going to just do an 8. I'm not going to do all the way up to high. Now we're just going to be waiting for steam to exit the vent pipe. And then we'll be back. Now while that's coming up to temperature, I'm going to finish packing the jars. As you can see, I don't know if you can see, there's a steady flow of steam coming out of the vent pipe. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the timer for 10 minutes. And we're just going to let that steam go for 10 minutes. If it seems really aggressive or that like it's too much, like right now it's pretty aggressive with the steam coming out. So all I'm going to do is turn our burner down to like a 5, and as you can see, it's still a steady flow of steam, but it's not spewing out everywhere. So you just kind of want to keep an eye on it and let it do its thing. It just sits there for 10 minutes. I don't really like getting too close to it when I have Lila. She just woke up from her nap. So the timer's going off. There's a steady flow of steam coming out the top of the canner here. The gauge is sitting at 0. So we're gonna put the pressure regulator on, ooh, it always scares me, on top of the vent pipe here. And now the pressure is going to start to build in the pot, and we're gonna see this come up. Now that we have the weight on there, I'm going to kick up the heat. The recipe says that we need 10 pounds of pressure. Based on where we live, our elevation, I'm gonna do 11 pounds of pressure. And in order to maintain that, as the gauge starts to approach the 10, I'm going to slow the burner down because we want it to sit right at that 11 pounds. We're gonna turn the burner down ever so slightly. We're sitting right at 11 pounds of pressure. I'll show you where my burner's at. It's right at the low medium, okay? Now we're gonna process these jars. Brace yourselves for an hour and a half. They're quart-sized jars. If they were pint-sized jars, it would be an hour. Now you want to make sure that you keep an eye on this and make sure that the gauge does not fall below whatever the required pressure is for where you are. So for us, for 11 pounds, like it's up to like 13 now, which is okay. It's okay if it's a little more. I'm just gonna turn the burner down to bring the pressure down just a little bit. But if it falls below your required pressure, you actually need to get it back up to the pressure that you need and restart the time all over again. So in my case, if it falls below the 11 pounds, I will have to reset the clock for an hour and a half. Just gonna keep an eye here on the pressure regulator. Make sure it stays where we need it to stay. Yeah! Oh, you found the recycling bin. That's exciting for you. You got some cardboard? What's unfortunate though is I have 2 jars here. I don't know if I'll have time to process these this afternoon. We will be back in an hour and a half. Okay, the timer's going off, so I'm gonna turn that off and turn the burner off. The next thing is now we're just gonna let it rest for a little bit. I'm gonna move it back off the burner. I can't right now because I'm holding Lila. I'm gonna move it back off the burner and let it completely come down to 0. The lock button is up. The canner still has a lot of pressure in it. So we're gonna let that come down to 0. Let the lock button drop down, and then we will remove the regulator. Here we go. Slide it up to the front here. So the gauge is now reading 0. And the lock button has fallen. We're gonna take the pressure regulator off, twist the lid. It's really important that you point it away, the steam away from your face, because you really can get hurt by the steam. It's very hot. I'm gonna lift that. And that's how those look in there. So we're gonna let those sit for 10 minutes. A lot of times when we're canning, it's usually just you leave them in there for 5 minutes while they cool off slightly. But when these have been processing in here for an hour and a half, it got very hot inside this pressure canner. So we're gonna let them sit there for about 10 minutes before we move them to the towel in our countertop. Now these ones I had 2 other quarts to process, but one of our kids has activities this evening that we have to bring her to. So we have to leave here in like a half hour, and I'm not gonna have time to process these. I'm gonna put these in the refrigerator. We're gonna wait a few minutes, let these cool off, and then we'll move them to the towel. Towel. They're gonna sit on the towel for at least 12 hours. And then as long as the seal is good, we're gonna remove the band, check the seal and make sure it's good. And as long as it's good, then I'm gonna write out a a label for it, and then it will sit in our pantry until we eat it. So one of the things I want to note, so I'm reheating it. When I was making the video, I noticed that it looks really watery when I was canning it, but that's because it thickens in the canning process and when you cook it. So the starches from the potato really thicken up the stew. We're going to be having this for dinner along with some cornbread tonight, but I just wanted to show that it does thicken up quite a bit, and you can't really tell that from when I was canning it. I'm really happy with how they turned out. It's gonna be really nice having those in the pantry as easy dinners or lunches. That'll do it for this video. Thank you so much for joining me while I canned up some beef stew with vegetables. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, remember to give this video a thumbs up, and we will see you next time. Thanks so much for watching. Bye!